You press the pedal to merge and for a half second the car just doesn't go. Then it catches up. Or it stumbles once, like it swallowed wrong, and you're left wondering if you imagined it. If your Toyota Corolla Cross is hesitating, that moment is more than annoying. It's a trust problem, because hesitation always shows up at the exact time you need the car to be decisive. Here's the tricky part: on a Corolla Cross, hesitation can be completely normal feeling behavior from the way the throttle and CVT are calibrated, or it can be the first warning sign of a real fault like a misfire, a fuel delivery issue, or an air metering problem. And those two categories can feel almost identical from the driver's seat. That's why people waste money swapping parts, or they ignore it until a check engine light starts flashing at the worst possible time. So the goal is not to guess. The goal is to classify what kind of hesitation you have, reproduce it on purpose, and then follow a path that starts with the simplest, safest checks and only gets more technical if the symptoms demand it. First, define hesitation like a mechanic would, not like a frustrated driver would. There are a few different sensations that get lumped into the same word. One is tip and lag. You roll into the throttle from a stop or low speed, and there's a brief delay before the engine responds. It feels like the pedal is connected through a rubber band. This is often drive-by-wire mapping and CVT behavior, especially if you're very gentle on the pedal and then ask for more. Another is a stumble or misfire-like hiccup. The engine feels like it drops a beat. You might feel a small jolt through the seat or steering wheel. This is more suspicious, because true misfires can damage the catalytic converter if they're severe. Another is a surge and settle. The car starts to accelerate, then backs off, then goes again. That can be traction control intervening, especially on wet pavement, gravel, painted lines, or when one tire is on a different surface. It can also be the transmission and engine management negotiating torque. And another is high load weakness. You're already moving, you press the pedal to pass or climb a hill, and it feels flat, like it's out of breath. That points more toward airflow, fuel delivery, or a restriction. Now add context, because context is the difference between characteristic and problem. Does it happen only when the engine is cold? Only after a hot soak, like after a quick stop at the store? Only with the AC on? Only right after refueling? Only at a certain speed range? Only when you're turning out of a driveway? If you can answer those questions, you're already ahead of most people walking into a shop. Before anything else, you need a safety filter. If the check engine light is flashing, don't keep testing it on the road. A flashing light usually means an active misfire severe enough that the car is warning you about catalyst damage. If the car is bucking hard, losing power dramatically, stalling, smelling strongly of raw fuel, overheating, or going into limp mode, that's not a wait-and-see situation. Get it diagnosed. The rest of this is for the more common scenario: intermittent hesitation, no flashing light, and the car still drives. Now, the fastest triage you can do without tools starts with the boring stuff that people skip because it doesn't feel like an answer. Fuel. If the hesitation started right after you filled up, treat that as a major clue. Bad fuel happens, and it doesn't have to be dramatic to cause drivability issues. Water contamination, the wrong octane for what the engine expects, or simply a station with poor turnover can create a stumble under load. If it began immediately after refueling, don't top it off again and again trying to fix it. Drive it gently, see if it improves as the tank level drops, and consider adding fresh fuel from a known good station on the next fill. If the symptom is severe right after refuel and you also notice extended cranking, rough idle, or a fuel smell, keep that in mind for later, because it can point toward an EVAP purge issue. Air filter and intake path. Open the air box, check the filter. If it's clogged, deformed, wet, or installed incorrectly, you can get weird throttle response. Also look for anything obvious: a loose clamp on the intake tube, a cracked hose, something not seated. Modern engines are sensitive to unmetered air leaks. A small leak can create a lean condition that shows up as hesitation when you tap in the throttle. Battery and electrical health. This one surprises people. If the battery is weak, or the voltage is unstable, the car can behave strangely: odd idle, inconsistent throttle response, and sometimes transmission behavior that feels like hesitation. If the car cranks slower than it used to, if the auto start-stop behavior seems odd, or if you recently had a battery disconnect or replacement, the issue may be relearning. That relearn can temporarily change how the throttle and CVT feel. It shouldn't cause violent stumbling, but it can create that "why is it thinking so hard" delay. Traction control. If the hesitation happens on takeoff, especially while turning, on uneven pavement, or in the rain, pay attention to whether the traction control light flickers. Many drivers interpret traction control intervention as engine hesitation. The car is literally reducing torque to prevent wheel spin. If you can reproduce the issue on a dry, straight road and it still happens the same way with no traction light activity, that's a different story. Now do a short, controlled test drive, because randomness is the enemy. You're not trying to drive fast. You're trying to make the symptom repeatable. Start with the engine fully warmed up. Find a safe, straight road. From a steady low speed, gently roll into the throttle, then do the same with a more decisive pedal input. Notice whether the hesitation is worse with a gentle to moderate pedal, or worse when you ask for power quickly. CVT and throttle mapping issues often feel worse when you're in that in-between zone, where the car is trying to be smooth and efficient. A true fuel or ignition problem often gets worse with higher load. Then try the same test with the AC on and off. If the hesitation is dramatically worse with the AC on, that can be normal load management, but it can also expose a marginal ignition or fuel issue. If you can, note the RPM behavior. Does RPM rise but the car doesn't accelerate immediately? That can feel like a transmission rubber band effect. Does RPM dip or flutter when the hesitation happens? That's more like an engine stumble. Now, if you have access to a basic OBD2 scanner, even a simple one, this is where you stop guessing and start narrowing. You don't need to be a technician. You just need two things, codes, and a few live data clues. If there are codes, don't clear them yet. Codes are evidence. Clearing them can erase freeze-frame data that shows what the engine was doing at the moment the fault was detected. Misfire codes often look like P0300 for random misfire or P0301 through P0304 for a specific cylinder. If you see those, hesitation is not just the CVT. It's an engine combustion problem until proven otherwise. Common causes include worn spark plugs, a weak ignition coil, or an injector issue. Sometimes it's a vacuum leak or air metering problem that makes one cylinder run leaner than the others. The key is that misfires under load are more concerning than a mild idle shake, because load is when the spark and fuel system are stressed. Fuel trim codes like P0171 or P0172 point toward the engine running too lean or too rich. That can absolutely feel like hesitation. Live data helps here. Look at short-term fuel trim and long-term fuel trim. You don't need exact numbers to learn something. If trims are consistently high positive, the engine is adding fuel to compensate for a lean condition, which can come from unmetered air, a dirty sensor, low fuel pressure, or exhaust leaks upstream of the oxygen sensor. If trims are strongly negative, it's pulling fuel, which can come from a leaking injector, excessive fuel pressure, or certain sensor errors. Air metering codes like P0101 often point toward MAF sensor performance issues or airflow that doesn't match expectations. A dirty MAF can cause hesitation, especially on tip-in. But here's one of the most expensive mistakes people make: they replace the MAF immediately, or they clean it with the wrong product and damage it. If you're going to clean a MAF, you use proper MAF cleaner, you don't touch the sensing element, and you let it dry fully. And you only do it if you have reason to suspect it, not because the internet told you it's always the fix. Now let's map the likely causes in a way that matches what you feel. If the hesitation is mostly a delay, especially from a stop, with no shaking, no roughness, and no codes, you may be feeling calibration and CVT behavior. Drive-by-wire throttles don't open instantly the way old cable throttles did. The ECU interprets your pedal request, considers traction, engine load, emission strategy, and then commands throttle and fueling. CVTs also change ratio in a way that can feel like the car is thinking. Some drivers notice it more in certain drive modes, or when they're feathering the pedal. In that case, the best diagnostic is consistency. Does it behave the same every time in the same conditions, and does it go away if you use a slightly more decisive pedal input? If yes, it may be characteristic rather than a fault. But if the hesitation feels like a stumble, especially under load, or it's getting worse, or it's inconsistent, you treat it like a fault until proven otherwise. Ignition is a big one. Spark plugs wear gradually, and modern engines can mask it until you ask for torque. A marginal plug gap or a coil that's starting to break down can produce a hesitation that only appears when you accelerate uphill or merge. You might not feel anything at idle. If you have misfire codes, a shop will often confirm by checking misfire counters, swapping coils between cylinders to see if the misfire follows, and inspecting plugs. If you're under warranty, you want that documented rather than experimenting. Air leaks and intake issues can mimic ignition problems. A small vacuum leak can lean out the mixture at certain times, causing a stumble on tip-in. Loose intake clamps, cracked hoses, or a PCV-related leak can do it. Sometimes you'll hear a faint hiss. Sometimes you won't. Fuel trims and a smoke test are the professional way to confirm. Fuel delivery issues are less common than people think, but they're real. Low fuel pressure, a weak pump, or injectors that aren't delivering evenly can cause hesitation under load. This often feels like the car is running out of breath when you ask for power, not just a momentary delay. It can be worse at higher speeds or on long hills. A technician will look at fuel pressure behavior and sometimes injector balance. Again, don't shotgun parts. Then there's the after refueling branch, which is its own world. If the hesitation appears right after filling the tank, especially combined with rough idle, stalling, or hard starts, the EVAP purge system becomes suspect. If the purge valve sticks open, it can pull fuel vapors into the intake at the wrong time, effectively flooding the engine briefly and causing a stumble. People often describe it as, "It runs weird right after I get gas." That's a very specific clue. It's also why topping off the tank repeatedly can make things worse, because it can saturate the charcoal canister. Software and adaptation are the quiet culprits. If the battery was disconnected, replaced, or went very low, the ECU may lose learned values and then relearn idle, throttle, and transmission behavior. During that period, the car can feel less smooth. Also, manufacturers sometimes release calibration updates that improve drivability complaints. You don't need to know the bulletin number to benefit from this. You just need to describe the symptom clearly and ask the dealer to check for updates related to hesitation, throttle response, or transmission control. Now, about resetting things. People love the idea of a magic reset. The truth is, resets can help in a narrow set of cases, and they can also hide a problem temporarily. Disconnecting the battery or clearing adaptive memory may make the car feel different for a while, but if there's an underlying issue like a vacuum leak or a weak coil, it will come back. If you're trying to get a proper diagnosis, especially under warranty, you generally want the evidence intact, codes, freeze-frame data, and a symptom that can be reproduced. There are a few low-risk steps that are reasonable if you're not seeing severe warning signs. Using good quality fuel from a reputable station. Replacing an obviously dirty air filter. Making sure the intake ducting is properly clamped and not cracked. Checking that the gas cap is properly tightened. If you suspect a MAF issue and you're confident, cleaning it correctly with the right cleaner can help, but if you're not confident, it's better to leave it to a shop than to turn a mild hesitation into a sensor replacement. What you should not do is start replacing coils, plugs, sensors, or throttle bodies because a forum thread said so. Modern cars are too interconnected for that approach, and you can easily spend more than a proper diagnostic would cost, while still having the same hesitation. Here's a practical way to decide whether you can keep driving while you schedule service. If the hesitation is mild, predictable, and not accompanied by warning lights, overheating, fuel smell, or harsh parking, you can usually drive cautiously and avoid situations where you need maximum acceleration until it's checked. But if the hesitation is sudden, severe, or unpredictable, treat it as a safety issue. The danger isn't the car braking. The danger is that you pull into traffic expecting acceleration and you don't get it. Now, when you go to a dealer or mechanic, the difference between a quick fix and a frustrating could not duplicate often comes down to how you present the problem. This is where you turn your experience into usable data. Record a short video when it happens, showing the speedometer and tachometer if possible, and narrate the conditions, engine warm or cold, AC on or off, after refueling or not, uphill or flat, and what the pedal input was. If you have an OBD2 scanner, take a photo of any codes and note whether the check engine light was steady or flashing. If your Toyota Corolla Cross is hesitating and you can show that it happens at, say, light throttle tipping around a certain speed, or only after refueling, you've just saved the technician a lot of time. Also, ask what they found, not just what they replaced. Did they see misfire counts? What did fuel trims look like? Did they check for intake leaks? Did they verify software updates? A good shop will be able to explain the logic without drowning you in jargon. Let's also clear up a few myths that keep people stuck. Myth 1, it's a CVT, they all do that. Some CVT feel is normal, yes. But a true stumble, especially with misfire codes or a flashing light, is not a personality trait. It's a fault. Myth 2, if there's no check engine light, nothing's wrong. Not true. Some issues don't set a code immediately. The ECU needs to see a fault pattern repeatedly before it flags it. You can have early-stage ignition problems, small vacuum leaks, or fuel quality issues without an immediate light. Myth 3, cleaning the throttle body always fixes hesitation. Sometimes a dirty throttle body can contribute to idle issues or tip-in behavior, but cleaning it incorrectly can create new problems, and on many modern cars the ECU expects a certain learned position. If you're chasing a hesitation under load, throttle body dirt is not the first suspect. Myth 4, just clear the codes and see if it comes back. If you're trying to get warranty coverage or a proper diagnosis, clearing codes can erase the most valuable snapshot of the problem. So what's the real answer to that uncomfortable question, why would a Corolla Cross hesitate at the exact moment you need power? Because two different systems can create the same sensation. One is the car intentionally managing torque for smoothness, efficiency, traction, and emissions. The other is the engine failing to deliver consistent combustion or the sensors failing to measure air and fuel correctly. From the driver's seat, both can feel like a pause. The difference is in the details, whether it's a delay versus a stumble, whether it's consistent versus random, whether it changes with load, temperature, refueling, or AC, and whether the car is leaving clues in codes and fuel trims. If you take one thing from this, make it this: don't start with parts. Start with patterns. Reproduce the symptoms safely, capture the conditions, check for codes without clearing them, and handle the simple basics first. And if the car is bucking hard, flashing a check engine light, or behaving unpredictably in a way that could put you at risk in traffic, stop treating it like a nuisance and treat it like a diagnosis that needs to happen now.